It's refreshing to be able to create a list of the most anticipated indie games and not have to include Silksong because it finally came out. However, Team Cherry have already stated in an interview with Bloomberg that they have big ideas, and we know that the big ideas with Hollow Knight eventually became Silksong. We've got a plan. Admittedly, some of the plans for that stuff are kind of ambitious as well, but hopefully we can achieve some of it, they said. However, the Silksong sequel or DLC isn't real just yet, so for now, let's take a look at the top 26 most anticipated indie games of 2026. Before we jump into the video, I just want to take a quick second to say thank you. I understand that life is busy and you have a lot of options on YouTube, so I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be here, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the video. Before going into the list, it's important to discuss some caveats or set some rules. To begin with, the term indie casts a very large net, as it could refer to one person or it could refer to a studio that's around 100 people but aren't owned by any parent company. Our personal favorite type of indie is what we would call the premium indie title, or as it's currently been coined, the III. To the best of our knowledge, all of the games on this list will be created by studios that are technically independent. However, a lot of these games have secured publishing deals, which doesn't make the studio or game any less independent. It just means that the studio was able to secure funding to keep people employed, complete development, and hopefully get to continue doing what they love. Also, this list is being created during the summer of 2025, which means that there is a lot of year left and a lot of uncertainty. We tried to rank them in order, but this is only based on current information, as dates are subject to change, as some of these games might actually still come out in 2025, and a few are likely to slip into 2027. Here are some quick fun stats about this list. It features 5 Metroidvanias, but 3 of them are very untraditional. It features 1 survival game, 2 cozy looking life sims, which is unusual for us, but they both have dark secrets lurking underneath. 1 deck builder that should appeal to people who don't like the genre. 2 games that are described as Souls-likes, but both have very unique twists on the genre. 2 Hazelight-inspired pure co-op adventures. 1 first-person shooter. 1 game with zombies that isn't actually about killing zombies, 1 game completely made by hand in the real world first, and at least 6 games with horror elements or darker themes. 2 games that have done successful Kickstarters, but most importantly, this list features 25 original IP and only 1 sequel, which highlights the power and creativity of indies, no matter how you classify them. With all that out of the way, let's take a look at our top 26 most anticipated indie games of 2026, starting with number 26. Number 26, Tides of Tomorrow. I might not be interested in Tides of Tomorrow for the reasons that the developers probably want. The extremely unique aspect of Tides of Tomorrow is that it uses an asynchronous multiplayer system that takes the gameplay from one of your friends or a streamer to shape your experience. However, for those who don't want to wait for a friend to finish or don't want to follow a streamer, there is also an offline mode that takes a couple of different custom developer playthroughs to provide you with the same experience. How the system works is that at pivotal moments in the story, you get to see what the person before you did and how it played out, which can help give you a major edge, as you could possibly learn that someone is lying or is very dangerous. While this concept sounds really interesting, I'm equally as interested in the plot of Tides of Tomorrow. There has been a great flood, and now the planet is basically Waterworld, which is a concept that I'm surprised hasn't been done before. In addition to that, with all of the plastic in the ocean, that is a very real-world problem. People have become ill with plastemia and are now in search of a cure before it's too late. I also love the vibrancy and unique art direction for Tides of Tomorrow. Tides of Tomorrow is also being developed by DigixArt, who made the critically acclaimed Road 96 from 2021, which was lauded for its interactive story elements, which sounds like the studio will double down on for Tides of Tomorrow. Number 25, Long Gone. The best zombie games are the ones that aren't actually about zombies, and that's why Long Gone is the most interesting and best looking game about zombies since The Last of Us, because it isn't really about zombies, it's about the stories within the world. Long Gone doesn't even feature combat. Instead, each zombie encounter is a puzzle where you need to utilize the environment around you. You take on the role of a survivor who has gotten separated from his group and finds himself in this village where his goal is to find batteries for his walkie-talkie and get back in touch with the rest of the team. In between these zombie puzzles, you will progress through the linear story-driven adventure where you will try to uncover the truth by piecing together items that you have found in the world from people left behind. Long Gone is inspired by The Last of Us Gone Home and Another World. Solo developer Hillfort Games are documenting the entire journey on YouTube, Twitch, and Patreon. If you watch any of the devlogs, you will see how passionate and talented and vulnerable Vin, the solo developer, is. If just a fraction of this gets transferred into the final product, Long Gone will be an absolute treat. Part of the journey was trying to find some funding or a publisher, and in the summer of 2025, Outer Sloth was announced as the publishing partner for Long Gone. Outer Sloth is the company that Inner Sloth started after the insane success of Among Us, which has now been leveraged to help other smaller indie devs. Number 24, PVKK. In PVKK, you were in charge of a giant planetary defense cannon in what feels like a natural evolution of Missile Command from 1980. On a day-to-day basis, you remain in your cozy bunker and handle the satisfying minutia of flipping switches, pushing buttons, rotating dials, and pulling levers to fend off the planet from invasion. This concept alone would be enough for a decent game since it's very unique, but it's everything else in between that has me intrigued. In between missions, you maintain and improve your living quarters, which are adjacent to the command center. Adding complexity and layers to the gameplay is the fact that you are in the middle of an autocratic regime, and your choices will carry weight. You will slowly unravel what is really going on and discover puzzles around the bunker that should lead you to the truth. PVKK is being developed by the team behind the critically acclaimed Dome Keeper, and it's also being published by Kepler Interactive, who have quietly been building up a fantastic publishing resume with titles like Sifu, Windblown, Bionic Bay, and the recently released Clair Obscur Expedition 33. This all bodes very well for the likelihood that PVKK will be another feather in the cap of Kepler Interactive. Number 23, At Fate's End. Thunder Lotus Games is a small studio from Montreal that came from even smaller beginnings in 2014 when the studio launched a Kickstarter to fund their first game, Jotun. The campaign was able to raise over $64,000, which was beyond the expectations of the studio. Jotun would also go on to sell over 1 million copies, and the studio would continue to leverage the success of one title to the next, moving from Sundered, which reached its Kickstarter goal in the first day, Spiritfarer, which secured a publishing deal with Kowloon Knights, and put the studio on the map with immense critical success and solid commercial success. At Fate's End is taking what the studio learned from Spiritfarer with its rich emotional narrative blended with gameplay and trying to build upon that foundation in new ways. The result is a more action-forward game with an equally intense story about how families fall apart and how they can get back together. Unlike 33 Immortals, which is in parallel development and is very multiplayer focused, At Fate's End will see Thunder Lotus return to a purely single-player experience. At Fate's End is being developed by the Spiritfarer team, and development began right after that title ended. At Fate's End is a 2D action-adventure where your skill tree is your family tree. Each sibling you defeat or reconcile with will greatly affect your experience. Collect 7 swords of power that will expand your arsenal of abilities. However, words are equally as important as battle, as At Fate's End features tactical dialogue, as well as narrative puzzles for you to solve. 33 Immortals is a really fun game with plenty of unique ideas, but for most people, At Fate's End will be the return to form for Thunder Lotus that they are looking for. Number 22, Death Howl. When the term Souls-like comes to mind, you think of dark and oppressive worlds that are full of death and decay. An isolated protagonist facing tremendous odds as they push forward on their quest, facing grotesque and ungodly creatures. In terms of mechanics, there's the combat that requires patience, a bonfire system to restore health, but also for enemies to respawn. There are souls that can be lost, but also play an integral role in the ability to upgrade the protagonist. This allows you to even the odds with enough determination. With the exception of real-time combat, Death Howl tweaks a few things to fit these into a deck builder. Instead of using souls to augment your strength or intellect, you craft new cards from many different categories. You could also argue that in place of stamina, Death Howl gives you action points in battle to use your wits and decide when to attack and when to defend, as patience and timing is a crucial element of not only this game, but of the genre. In Death Howl, you play as a mother who, after a ritual, has been transported to the spirit realm in a desperate search of her recently deceased son. Exploration takes place from an isometric perspective with a Diablo-style control as you click where you want to move, but the combat then takes place on a grid with a turn-based system that requires a very tactical approach. The world is deeply atmospheric, the art style takes a beautiful minimalist approach, the score is haunting, the gameplay is challenging, and the UI is intuitive. Combining the terms deck building and Souls-like seems like a stretch, but after playing Death Howl, it makes perfect sense and feels wholly unique. The demo did an incredible job of establishing the universe, giving a feel for the majority of the mechanics and teasing what lies ahead, including the many biomes that await you in this journey through the spirit realm. Number 21, Tenjutsu. Deep Night Games have only one title on their portfolio, and it's a very short 2D game about firefighting your way into a mysterious government facility to uncover what lies behind this inferno, and you also had to rescue cats. It began in a game jam, was created in 48 hours, and was designed with the creator's 3-year-old son in mind who loves firefighting. Nuclear Blaze is only a few dollars and only takes a handful of hours, and if you haven't played it, I highly recommend it. But why should you be excited for their follow-up Tenjutsu? To put it simply, Deep Night Games is Sebastian Bernard, who just happens to be the creator of Dead Cells, who eventually left Motion Twin to start his own studio. Nuclear Blaze had the incredible game feel that Dead Cells had, which was the litmus test that proved how talented Bernard was. It's obvious that game feel is his specialty. On his sophomore game at Deep Night Games, Bernard changes perspective and puts the player into the shoes of a Yakuza looking for revenge. As you dismantle the Yakuza, you also loosen its grip on the city, which breathes new life with shops and restaurants popping up that will add hidden shortcuts to future runs and will allow you to unlock new weapons and moves. Clearly, I wasn't the only one who played or took notice of Nuclear Blaze, as Devolver Digital have snagged the publishing rights for Tenjutsu, which bodes very well. Number 20, Blighted. If Drinkbox Studios, the team behind Guacamelee and Nobody Saves the World, are making a new game, it will immediately get my attention, but this is especially true if they are returning to the Metroidvania genre with a new perspective and a bunch of fresh ideas. The Toronto-based studio is known for their quirky ideas, and Blighted is no different. The premise revolves around an ancient culture that would bury their dead with seeds in their brains because they had great knowledge, which would then grow into a tree and would bear fruit with that knowledge, which would then be passed on from generation to generation to those that ate the fruit from the tree. I haven't even gotten to the weird part yet. The evil Sorcisto decided that he would cut out the middleman and just go straight to eating the brains of the living, making him the most powerful and robbing everyone else of knowledge. To somehow make matters worse, Sorcisto has also infected the world with a deadly blight. However, one of the most interesting aspects of Blighted is that you can either choose to embrace the blight, which makes you more powerful, but also increases the challenge. Blighted features a psychedelic Western aesthetic, but still is rooted in a Drinkbox style. Blighted will be available in solo or co-op, and I was fortunate enough to play with the devs at Summer Game Fest in local co-op, and it was an absolute blast. Number 19, Grave Seasons. Recent Nintendo Directs and indie showcases are overflowing with farming sims or cozy games after the wild success of games like Stardew Valley that prove that there is a huge market for the genre, but that it can also be achieved by smaller indie devs. I am definitely not the target for life sims or cozy farming sims, which is why a lot of these showcases of recent memory don't fully resonate with me. Titles like Stardew Valley never fully captured my attention, but I do like horror, and combining a cozy farming sim with horror elements is something that does intrigue me. It intrigued me enough to want to check out Grave Seasons, which is being developed by Perfect Garbage and is being published by Blumhouse Games, which will be one of their first titles published since they started in 2023. The big twist with Grave Seasons is that someone in the town is a supernatural serial killer. After managing to escape from jail, you try to start a new life where no one knows you or will ever find you. You try to blend in, farm your land, and mind your own business. Unfortunately, a severed hand winds up in your crops. You need to befriend the people of the town to try to find out who the killer is. Everything you do or don't will play a major role in how the story unfolds, and yes, you can befriend the killer. Grave Seasons is another game that I was fortunate enough to get the chance to play at Summer Game Fest play days, and while I only got to play 30 minutes, it left me very intrigued and wanting more. Number 18, Valor Mortis. Valor Mortis is an interesting proposition. It's a first-person Souls-like set in the Napoleonic era about a soldier who rises from death, wields otherworldly powers, and must solve a supernatural conspiracy that is interwoven with historical reality. There is a mysterious substance spreading across the lands that is corrupting loyal soldiers just like you once were. The other two reasons that Valor Mortis is intriguing is because it's being developed by One More Level, the studio behind the Ghostrunner franchise, and it's also being published by the newly formed Lyrical Games. Lyrical Games is composed of former members of Private Division, Devolver Digital, and Humble Games. And their mission statement is promising. We are not building a live service, a billion-dollar empire, and we are not chasing quarterly earnings. We back exceptional games. When you combine this mission statement with the work experience of Lyrical, and this being the first game that the company signed, the developers behind it, and the premise of Valor Mortis, there are a lot of reasons to be very optimistic. Valor Mortis features a very visceral style which shouldn't come as a surprise to those familiar with Ghostrunner, and I might be wrong, but Valor Mortis could also be the first ever first-person Souls-like. To the people that got the chance to go hands-on at Gamescom, they spoke very highly of their time and how well the game worked in first person. Number 17, Prelude Dark Pain. Prelude Dark Pain is a turn-based tactical RPG, but if you wanted the elevator pitch, it would be Darkest Dungeon meets Final Fantasy Tactics. Prelude Dark Pain is set in a dark fantasy world, and you are at the core of humanity's last hope against evil. You play as Soren, a lowly blacksmith who will lead an uprising against the Order of the Ashen Crusade. On your quest, you will form a party from over 20 playable heroes that feature 2 different talent branches and a pool of 25 skills, allowing you to create the exact type of squad that you desire. These heroes range from your typical RPG classes, including DPS, support, assassin, and many others. During your quest, you will have to make tough choices that will not only affect the narrative, but what heroes will be able to join your cause. With a lack of publisher, Quickfire Games launched a Kickstarter in the summer of 2025 to aid in development, with the goal being to collect $40,000. However, with the help of over 3,000 backers, they were able to secure almost 320% of their initial target to raise over $120,000. Quickfire Games hopes to release 3 free DLCs post-launch, including one that features a blasphemous collaboration with the Game Kitchen, who also happen to be located in Spain. On the Kickstarter page, the list of inspirations range from the obvious Darkest Dungeon, Final Fantasy Tactics, and Tactics Ogre, to ones that you might not expect, including World of Warcraft, Dark Souls, and League of Legends. Prelude Dark Pain is being developed by Quickfire Games, who are located in Spain and were founded in 2020. The bulk of development began with just 2 people, however, the studio has grown slightly to around a dozen. Early access is scheduled for spring 2026, with a full release aiming for summer of 2027. Number 16, Denshattack. Denshattack is probably the oddest game on this list as it combines trains, Tony Hawk, and anime. When I first saw the trailer, I was pretty sure that it had something to do with Jet Set Radio Future, which it doesn't, but the devs have listed the series as a big source of inspiration. You play as a train in a transformed Japan as you ollie, kickflip, and grind your way through some of the most recognizable places, including Osaka, Tokyo, Hokkaido, and more as you try to defeat the evil Murado Corporation. In addition to platforming your way through these locations as a train, you will build up your reputation with gangs to form new allies and transform your train to the ultimate corporation killing machine. In between you and your end goal lies a flurry of enemies and bosses, including giant mechs, moving castles, mechanical worms, and an army of trains who want to put you to an end. The world of Denshattack is insanely bright, vibrant, and will take you across 50 different levels. Due to a climate crisis, the rich have been protected by an air-purifying dome, and the rest have been left to survive in the barren wastelands. In addition to the extreme visuals, the audio will also be an assault on your senses, as T. Lopes will be the lead composer known for his great work on games like Sonic Mania, Streets of Rage 4, and TMNT Shredder's Revenge. Number 15, Ill. Ill is the first project from Munfish Powerhouse. After the success of Atomic Heart, which has been able to reach over 10 million players, Munfish started a new program to help smaller studios with ambitious and creative visions. In addition to providing financial support, Munfish is also offering creative and operational support that they have learned along the way. Ill is a debut title from Team Clout, who are composed of a little over 30 people who mostly have background in horror, working on film series like It and VHS, just to name a few. Ill is a first-person action survival horror game that takes place in a huge research fort. What immediately jumps out with Ill is the realism, which is in large part due to the incredible lighting system, the realistic physics, and one of the most visceral dismemberment systems we have ever seen. According to the Steam description, Ill pushes the limits of the genre with gory realism, grotesque monsters that can be maimed and mercilessly torn to pieces. Shredded flesh, exposed bones, and eviscerated carcasses will make an unprecedented impression and shock you to your core. When you combine this extreme violence with the binaural audio system, dynamic enemy behavior, and realistic physics, Ill has the chance to seep into your subconscious. There were a few guns shown in the trailer and they both looked very different, and this is purposeful as the developers are aiming for distinct weight and feel for each weapon. In addition, you will have to navigate weapon defects as well as modify and upgrade them. Finally, in keeping in line with tradition of the survival horror, Ill will feature strategic inventory management, with the devs saying your ability to create an item could determine the outcome of the battle. Number 14, Out of Words. I love games that use real stop-motion animation techniques, and I also love games that feature a Hazelight style co-op where there is no option to play solo and you need to work together with your partner. What if you combined these two loves? The result would be Out of Words from Kong Orange and Wiredfly, the two studios that combine to a total of about 30 people. Out of Words is about Kurt and Carla and their quest to save their relationship. They have somehow been transported to the realm of Vocabulantis and have lost their voices. The game is pure co-op and will require great communication or words. In what has become the norm for the co-op platformer, you will need to solve physics-defying puzzles throughout your journey that will take you from the ancient catacombs to Nauenberg, where clay skyscrapers go as far as the eye can see. Out of Words was one of the 3 games that Epic Publishing brought to Summer Game Fest Playdays. Although I was unable to secure a time slot to go hands-on with it, based on my time with the other 2 games that Epic brought, End of Abyss and Infinitesimals, Out of Words is going to be an incredible adventure. Out of Words also features an incredibly adorable sidekick that looks like a stingray and behaves like a dog that people are almost guaranteed to fall in love with. Also, if you want to check out a bunch of behind the scenes on how the whole thing is created, it's all being documented on their YouTube channel with a very interesting look behind the curtain with a few videos per month. Number 13, Sleep Awake. In 2023, Blumhouse Games was formed with the intention of creating great interactive horror experiences using the same blueprint that they use for their film division. That blueprint involves smaller budgets on indie teams who have unique ideas, and as of now, Blumhouse has only published one game, which was Fear the Spotlight, a title that was actually on sale before Blumhouse grabbed the publishing rights. Fear the Spotlight was taken down, improved, and re-released to a more positive critical and commercial reception. Sleep Awake is a first-person psychological horror title set in the near future where people are disappearing in their sleep. For the people that remain, their only hope is reckless experiments to remain awake. You have to survive what is left of humanity to be able to find out why everything is happening. Sleep Awake fuses together FMV with a psychedelic art style, which is sure to fully immerse you in the world, as you won't be able to separate reality from hallucinations, which is something that happens during insomnia. Sleep Awake will be the debut title from Eyes Out, a studio that was co-founded in 2019 by Corey Davis, who is most known for his work on Spec Ops: The Line, where he served as lead designer and director. The other co-founder of Eyes Out is Robin Fink, who has served as the guitarist of Nine Inch Nails for most of the year since 1994. Considering this will be the first game from Eyes Out, and likely the first game to be published by Blumhouse Games that basically wasn't finished when it was signed, like Fear the Spotlight, there is high expectations riding on Sleep Awake. One reason to be optimistic is because Sleep Awake was chosen as one of the selections for the Tribeca Festival, who have a history of cherry-picking some incredible upcoming titles. Number 12, Crowsworn. With Hollow Knight Silksong finally out of the way, all of the attention is now shifting to what Metroidvania is going to be the next big thing, which is a lot of pressure. Crowsworn is not trying to hide their inspirations. On their Kickstarter page, the description reads, "Explore a grim fantasy world inhabited by men and monsters alike in this action-packed Metroidvania inspired by Hollow Knight, Bloodborne, and Devil May Cry." Crowsworn is a hand-drawn Metroidvania with a strong design emphasis on explorative platforming, immersive combat, and compelling storytelling. Another reason that Crowsworn sounds exciting is because 2 of their achieved stretch goals on Kickstarter were to add voice acting for the main character, some NPCs, and some bosses, as well as the other stretch goal to feature fully animated cinematic cutscenes which were outsourced to a studio with expertise in the field. Both of these features are not only going to make Crowsworn feel much more like a premium game as opposed to the indie that it is, but it will also breathe life into the world and hopefully make it even more immersive. We had the privilege of playing the media and backers demo, which feels very clean and highly polished. Drawing from their Bloodborne inspiration, every single enemy is challenging. They react differently every time, and it's just as easy to be overwhelmed very quickly from low-level mobs. If you don't know, everything in the demo was content that didn't make the final game, which makes you wonder how good the final game will be if this wasn't good enough. What Mongoose Rodeo did to create the demo was take all of the cut content and then create some newly designed areas to create something that felt more like a cohesive experience. The easier thing to do would have just been to stitch these rooms together and release it, but that wasn't good enough. There are 2 things that I take away from reading between the lines of this demo. The first is that the standards of Mongoose Rodeo are extremely high, as they didn't want to release a disjointed demo experience. Furthermore, the demo felt incredible, and it's easy to forget that this is the level of quality that didn't make the final product. Both of these bode very well for the full release of Crowsworn. Number 11, Recur. I love platformers, and 2D ones have a very soft spot in my heart, especially ones that break the mold in some way, shape, or form. Some bring narrative like Celeste, others bring atmosphere like Inside, and some bring unique puzzle mechanics like Braid. Recur looks to blend a lot of these elements together, but it's the time manipulation mechanic that is truly attention grabbing. Unlike Braid, where you control time with buttons, time is based around your movement in Recur. When you move forward or to the right of the screen, time passes normally, but go backwards or to the left of the screen and the time will reverse. In Recur, you play as a postman who has discovered the ability to turn back the clock, which would be interesting on any normal day, but this all happens at the edge of the apocalypse, and the fate of humanity lies in this postman's hands. In addition to the mechanics, Recur also features an appealing look with a cel-shaded inspired art style and the promise of an engaging story as you try to discover why the world is ending. This concept was already something very big-brained, but at Gamescom, the team had clocks that sat on the table in the real world that moved forwards and backwards in sync with the game. This might seem insignificant, but if this is the effort they have for something outside of the game that only a few people will see, I can't wait to experience what is actually in the game. Number 10, Blackfrost, The Long Dark 2. I always wanted to get into The Long Dark, but I missed the boat in 2014, and before you knew it, there were constant updates and DLCs, which increased the barrier entry. Hinterland will be taking the decade plus of experience that they have with The Long Dark and applying all of it to Blackfrost. The Long Dark was a single-player experience that pitted you against Mother Nature. There was a variety of ways to play, including the episodic stories that would take the average player about 30 hours. There was just the standard survival sandbox mode with more than 50 square kilometers of map, and there were challenge modes that would take about 1 to 3 hours per. In the words of the studio, Blackfrost refines every aspect of the original. The big change is the addition of co-op, which is great to offer people more ways to play, but I think it might risk ruining the atmosphere of surviving in the wilderness alone. Blackfrost takes place about a year after the events of the first game, with people starting to emerge, meaning that there will be a lot of NPCs and settlements that will drastically change how you approach the game. In addition to the vast wilderness of the first, Blackfrost will include some dense urban areas that are full of new opportunities, but also plenty of threats. One of the big changes mechanically to the sequel is the will to live system that adds an element of psychological willpower to the already complex systems as you learn to manage your doubts, fears, and anxieties. Number 9, Felt That Boxing. I've said it before and I'll say it again, we need a new Punch-Out. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out released in 1987 for the NES, which eventually just became Punch-Out after the 3-year licensing deal ended with Mike Tyson, and it's still one of the greatest Nintendo titles of all time. Yet somehow, it only received 2 sequels. The first was Super Punch-Out for the SNES, which was developed by Nintendo in '94, and the next was 15 years later on the Wii. The last entry in the series was created by Next Level Games in 2009, which was simply titled Punch-Out. Despite critical acclaim, sales were relatively low for a Nintendo title, selling just over 1 million units. Felt That Boxing was probably the strangest thing from Summer Game Fest, as it combined Sesame Street with Punch-Out. You play as unlikely hero Fuzz E, who must step into the shoes of his father, who is a boxing legend. A greedy developer is threatening to bulldoze the puppet orphanage, and now he needs to win the tournament of 1 million punches to stop the puppet orphanage from being demolished. Felt That Boxing also looks to go beyond a simple arcade boxer, with loads of minigames in between matches, secret moves to unlock, a story mode that should last 8 to 12 hours, and a soundtrack featuring Flying Lotus that evolves as fights and training escalate. Felt That Boxing is the Punch-Out that I didn't know I needed. Number 8. Dispatch. The hope is that Dispatch will prove once and for all that the problem with Telltale Games wasn't the lack of talent, but it was just unfortunately mismanaged, which is slightly ironic since Dispatch is a game about management. Dispatch is being developed and published by Ad Hoc Studio, a studio that was founded in 2018 from many of the talented people behind The Walking Dead, The Wolf Among Us, and Tales from the Borderlands, including creative directors, writing directors, and many others who banded together shortly after Telltale Games filed for bankruptcy and laid off 90% of its staff. In addition to being smart with the size of the studio, which is only around 40 people compared to the 250 that Telltale had at their largest, Dispatch is also an original IP, which means that the studio can save loads of money not having to pay licensing fees, and instead invest that into other areas of Dispatch that are going to be more effective. In Dispatch, you play as Mecha Man, a superhero who has lost his suit that was destroyed in a battle with his nemesis. Powerless, Mecha Man must now work at the superhero call center and dispatch superheroes across the city where they are needed. You need to juggle office relationships, life or death decisions in the field, and rebuilding your mech suit to finally get revenge. Not only do the visuals look like a high-profile, high-budget animated series from Netflix or Disney+, but the story sounds engaging, and best of all, the performances are anchored by a stacked voice cast, which is likely due to having resources not used up from licensing fees. Aaron Paul from Breaking Bad, Jeffrey Wright from American Fiction, and Laura Bailey from The Last of Us 2 are just a few of the names that will be giving these superheroes personality. Dispatch was also named as one of the official selections for the Tribeca Festival, which have a pretty keen eye for spotting great games. 2024 selections included games like Neva, Thank Goodness You're Here, and Blueprints. Number 7. Rewilders: The Lost Spring. Rewilders is from the studio behind the BAFTA award-winning Endling Extinction is Forever. In Rewilders: The Lost Spring, you fight to bring back ecosystems by battling Mother Nature's enemies. Rewilders might look very cozy on the surface with its open-world exploration, but bubbling below is an action roguelike gameplay with Souls-like combat and Metroidvania progression. Sticking with studio values, Rewilders is built around telling an emotional narrative. Your main goal is to reclaim the world and restore it through rewilding and putting it back to how it was in the first place. This is done in a very satisfying manner, as the world is dark and barren, but with your help, turns vibrant and beautiful. During your exploration, as you reclaim biomes, the inhabitants will slowly return. You will be able to find creatures, collect them, and then evolve them. These creatures are native to the lands and provide plenty of benefits to the character, such as active abilities and passive bonuses. You will also slowly discover the interconnected world with new skills that you will acquire during your quests, such as gliders, wall runs, and grapples. When you die, you will have the ability to improve your base by growing plants and fruits, which will upgrade your abilities and unlock permanent buffs. Hero Beat Studios are dedicated to developing new IPs that address meaningful topics. Their main goal is to raise awareness about social impact issues through the power of video games. Number 6. Neverway. Neverway is co-created by the pixel artist of Celeste, and considering that EXOK are now defunct, this is more pertinent than ever. The score is also being composed by Disaster Piece, who created one of the best soundtracks of the last decade with Hyper Light Drifter. They have also done soundtracks for It Follows and Fez as well. However, what has me truly interested is that Neverway is kind of capturing that spirit of Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, with the main character jumping between reality, and the Neverway as is described as a nightmarish life sim RPG. Neverway is a psychological horror about a girl named Fiona who quits her dead-end job and decides to move to Montgomery Island for a fresh start by buying a farm away from all of the distractions of reality. However, not all is well, as you need to stop the horrors of the Neverway from bleeding into reality in a concept that feels reminiscent of Stranger Things. The intent from the developers was to create a bold juxtaposition by blending wholesome and horror, which they feel create moments that are a lot more intense and resonate stronger. Like most life sim RPGs, there will be plenty of farming, which I'm not typically the right audience for, but it also doesn't appear to be the focal point of the game either, and will likely be enjoyable in smaller doses. There will also be a big social aspect as you can meet, become friends, and even romance dozens of people with each bond, unlocking buffs and abilities to use in the Neverway. Circling back to the similarities of A Link to the Past, Neverway features a top-down perspective with a 16-bit-esque art style, fast-paced combat, exploration, upgrades, and most importantly, the traveling between two different worlds. Number 5. Infinitesimals. Infinitesimals was one of the most pleasant surprises of Summer Game Fest playdays for myself. I saw the trailer like most people did during the Summer Game Fest showcase, and Infinitesimals looked great. Some people even said it looked like Grounded, but here's the thing. Infinitesimals started nearly a decade before Grounded, and best of all, it's not a survival game. It's a narrative-focused, third-person, immersive sim that draws heavy inspiration from 90s classics like Deus Ex and Thief, as well as classic movies like Star Wars and Predator. You play as Captain Ocney Rellenrake, the leader of an elite alien squadron, and after a catastrophic crash, Captain Ocney and the rest of his squad have been stranded on an alien planet which just happens to be Earth. Captain Ocney is smaller than your average protagonist at around the size of a grasshopper, and he must navigate his way through a world filled with treacherous terrain, local wildlife, and deadly machines. What's immediately interesting is that Infinitesimals is set on Earth, but it's very unclear in what time period. In addition to trying to piece together the mystery of planet Earth, you're also trying to find the rest of your squadron and uncover the mystery of the colony that you were supposed to join that has vanished, as mechanical sentinels known as the hunter-gatherers appear to have completely taken over this planet. You must reunite with your squad to rebuild and rise up against the hunter-gatherers. There will be stealth gear and stealth equipment, but there will also be assault equipment. What defines your character is how you play and the gear that you equip. Infinitesimals isn't an open world game, but just like Deus Ex and Thief, games that heavily influence the development, there are huge curated sandboxes that are referred to as large hubs, and in these areas you are free to explore and investigate whatever sparks your interest. Qubit wants to encourage and reward player curiosity. Number 4. Rock Beasts. What makes Indies more interesting than your average game is that the potential for a brand new experience unlike anything you've ever played before is not only possible, it's probable. In Rock Beasts, you play as a manager in this story-driven RPG where you try to take a band from unknowns to stardom in the MTV era. Rock Beasts is a dark comedy penned by the same author who wrote The Witcher 3, Cyberpunk 2077, and the upcoming vampire title, The Blood of Dawnwalker. As a manager constantly looking for talent, you're almost at the end of your rope after listening to the Tortoise Trio to Shell and Back, but then you think about the support band before them with the ostrich on vocals, the deer on guitar, the bass on bass, and the rabbit on drums. You think that this band is a little rough around the edges, but with enough help and direction from you, they could be something huge. It won't be easy, as you will need to navigate tough decisions during the grunge era, such as the big ones from the venues that you play, the set list, and the labels you sign with, down to the smaller decisions including how to get a meal and a working amp. Rock Beast is a constant balancing act of health, hype, mood, and focus of the band, as well as your bank account. If this whole premise wasn't unique enough, the whole world is animals. While most of the game is the management sim aspect, it also looks like playing well at gigs is equally as important to spread the word of mouth, with gameplay that looks to incorporate that music rhythm that we're all familiar with from Rock Band or Guitar Hero with scrolling button prompts. Rock Beast features over 100 characters that you will meet on your rise to stardom that will present very real choices and shape the narrative that will determine the fate of the band. The game is fully voice acted, including Iggy Pop, as well as 17 completely original tracks for you to play that were created just for rock beasts. Number 3. Stage Fright. When Stage Fright was first revealed at the Game Awards in December of 2024, the UK studio leaned into the fact that most people likely don't know them by name, but for sure know their games. However, when I saw the logo for Ghost Town Games, I instantly got excited. Ghost Town is the very small team behind the Overcooked series, the super fun and super casual co-op cooking game that has the power to ruin relationships. All jokes aside, Overcooked created a market that didn't exist, and since its release in 2017, people have been trying to duplicate the magic with co-op games that are casual, but also secretly hardcore. Games like Good Job, Moving Out, and more have tried, but Overcooked is still the best. An extremely simple premise with minimal controls that is very easy to pick up with a requirement for great communication. Personally, I would have been extremely happy with another Overcooked sequel, as I still regularly play it to this day, but I couldn't be happier that Ghost Town Games doesn't want to be boxed in as a studio that can only make Overcooked and wants to try something new. In their new game Stage Fright, Ghost Town is still leaning into what they do best, which is to innovate in the co-op space, but this time from a very different perspective. Stage Fright is a coming-of-age story about Drew, Blake, and Charlie who are trying to unravel some type of mystery. The spotlight will be on Ghost Town to prove if they can write a captivating narrative, as the story in Overcooked was less than engaging. Stage Fright immediately conjures up comparisons to Hazelight, the makers of It Takes Two and Split Fiction, who have made a name for themselves, and Ghost Town Games will have their work cut out as people will inevitably draw comparisons. Very little is known about the plot of Stage Fright at the moment, but I can't wait to learn more. Number 2. The Eternal Life of Goldman. The Eternal Life of Goldman was already pretty high on my list of most anticipated games, but after their last trailer titled Can Fairy Tales Hurt was revealed, my anticipation has moved into another level. The trailer features a voiceover of a mother talking to her child, and whether or not this will be part of the story or part of the final game, it features some very sharp writing and incredible voice acting, which bodes extremely well for the final product. This provides a level of confidence that the game will have much more depth than just stunning frame-by-frame hand-drawn animation. The Eternal Life of Goldman is being developed by Cyprus-based studio Weappy, who are best known for their work on the series This Is the Police. To create an uncompromising 2D look, they went back to the roots of the genre to draw, color, and animate every single frame using classic techniques. As a result, The Eternal Life of Goldman immediately grabs your eye like few games have the ability to do. You might not know what's different, but you are clearly aware in your subconscious that something is. You play as Goldman, an explorer in the later stages of his life, not unlike Indiana Jones. With the help of his trusty and modifiable cane, Goldman needs to travel deep into the vast archipelago and defeat a mysterious deity, by relying on his wits more than his brute strength. The Eternal Life of Goldman also looks to avoid a lot of the trappings of the common 2D platformer. There are Metroidvania elements, but they don't want you to be backtracking or lost after you find a new ability. There are precision platformer elements, but they don't want you to become a well-oiled machine, as improvisation and ingenuity should lead to success as well. It also has a deep story with complex characters, but it doesn't want to bog down the gameplay. The goal is to create an adventure that will not only take your breath away, but will also break your heart, in their words. And that brings us to number 1, End of Abyss. End of Abyss is an atmospheric, top-down, twin-stick horror Metroidvania that looks like it was created from the likes of Playdead or Tarsier Studios, and there's a good reason for that. End of Abyss is being developed by Section 9 Interactive, a small indie studio founded by the former founders of Tarsier Studios, including tech leads, art leads, and creative directors. End of Abyss is deeply inspired by the early NES classics The Legend of Zelda and Metroid, two games that strongly embraced the less is more approach. Worlds that were vast, full of mystery, danger, and begged to be explored. The focus was on exploration, non-linearity, and atmosphere. There was something so intriguing about never knowing what was around the next corner, and that is echoed in End of Abyss. The list of inspiration for End of Abyss is extremely long and extends far outside of gaming. Anime like Akira, Ghost in the Shell, as well as movies like The Thing. But the most prominent inspiration is easily Ridley Scott's 1979 horror film Alien. In End of Abyss, you play as a female protagonist, Cell, but also, just like the crew of the Nostromo who followed a distress signal in the deep reaches of space that faded most of the people aboard, End of Abyss follows a very similar structure by investigating a distress signal that says to the one that hears this, "We are waiting for you." Although investigating distress signals has become a sci-fi trope, that's because the device works perfectly as it taps into the core of our humanity and our innate desire to help others. The alien inspiration carries forward with an environmental design that also feels retro-futuristic. End of Abyss was easily the best thing that I played at Summer Game Fest with its dark, atmospheric tone paired with a unique perspective and twin-stick controls. End of Abyss felt as much like survival horror as it did twin-stick shooter as it did a Metroidvania, which ultimately meant that it felt like nothing I have ever experienced before, and why it's our most anticipated game of 2026. That's all for this video. If you enjoyed it and you want to help, then the biggest thing that you can do is to leave a comment, so let me know what your most anticipated game of 2026 is. I hope to see you again in the next video, and until next time, be good to your fellow gamer, but more importantly, be better to your fellow human.